Leeds blunt blades and go odds on for the championship title. Oh, Marisa, top geezer, as Cardiff put the grim in pilgrimage for Argyle. Pompey and Cambridge win for the first time this season, and Walsall score 4 to put the grim in grim's... No, I've already used that one. I'm Ali Maxwell, he's George Elek. This is not the Top 20 podcast, the number one podcast for Championship, League 1 and League 2, giving you the best EFL weekend recap around, available in your ears on podcast platforms and in your eyes on YouTube. The Championship returned from its international break with a bang, with a fixture between the two favourites for the title pre-weekend, George. They were Leeds United and Sheff Utd, and it finished Leeds 2, Sheff United 0. That was Blades' first defeat of the season, and it left us with Chris Wilder saying, Leeds United are the best team we've played all season. He made a tactical tweak here, didn't end up working in terms of the result, but it took a while for Leeds to break down the door.
Yeah, it did. I think they were taken by surprise by the switch to the 3 at the back with the wing-backs from Chris Wilder. It obviously didn't work. I think there are going to be some Blades fans who are like, why did he change a winning team? Why didn't we stick with what we were doing before? We have no way of knowing if it would have made any difference. I think given the general way the game developed, I doubt it would have done, because there was quite a clear quality divide between the two teams. And that's, there's no criticism of Sheffield United. It's just that when you play Leeds at Ellen Road and they're at their best, they are, I think, just quite comfortably the best team in the league. We've said that in recent weeks. Quite funny to see how many Leeds fans seem to kind of message us or me on Twitter after the game being like, oh my God, maybe you're right. Maybe we are actually quite good.
Well, you've now got a nice and exciting season-long duel with someone on Twitter called Sylvester the Touring Cat, who, after last week's FOTMob Corner segment, which was your strong pro-Leeds stance in the State of the Nation pod, tweeted to say, that Leeds supporting monologue was desperate. Ifs, buts and maybes just to justify some strange love for a bang-average side. They won't win the title, and they aren't the best team in the championship. So I guess this week, Sylvester... Well, no, Sylvester's probably scrambling around to find Chris Wilder's number and text him the same. Yeah. Because Wilder went pretty strong on it post-game as well. Leeds went ahead through a great shinish from Pascal Stroik. That's not a misspeak. He shinned it on the bounce into the top corner. It was a brilliant finish.
I loved the corner from Rothwell. I think it was quite harshly described as like a poor corner on commentary, whereas I think...
Did look it initially.
Yeah, but then you see the reverse angle that he knows it's basically a pass. Yeah. Like he sees Strauch and he's actually aiming to do exactly that. And even though it was a fortunate finish in that it came off the shin, I do think, zipping off that turf, if you can get any kind of contact that Strauch did to put it in the back of the net, then that's fairly impressive. And on Rothwell, like it seems to me that in the build-up to this game, the narrative around Leeds was they're trying to get Kouyaté and they're trying to get Francis Coquelin and they were talking about
Gilvogui.
Yeah, and they were talking about Tanaka and Rothwell almost as if they were like League 2 players who had to come in and play. And in reality, like Tanaka, I thought was exceptional on the day. He's such a clever, really calm presence. Someone who's happy to drop in between Strauch and Roden in possession and dictate the tempo from the back. He's calm in possession. He can break the lines with his passing ability when he needs to be. And then in Rothwell, you've got a guy who's so dynamic, who's able to carry the ball out of midfield so effectively. And they're two really good championship players. Yes, of course, if either of these two teams, if either of these two players get injured before the likes of Ampadu and Grover back, then they've got an issue. But right now, like they dominated the midfield in this game, both from a defensive point of view, but also crucially on the ball.
That was a good return to the Championship's action, George. Before the game, there was an incredible, very moving and touching tribute to former Sheffield United defender and Oxford United and MK Dons, among others, defender George Baldock, who, of course, passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it was, after the scenes with Greece winning at Wembley, dedicating that win to George Baldock the day after he died. It was always going to be very emotional to see how Sheffield United fans reacted to that. He was someone who came to the club at the kind of beginning of the first Chris Wilder era, and was a huge part in their promotion success. He played a massive role in that first season in the Premier League where they finished 9th. And he's someone who, throughout his career in the EFL, was an incredibly popular player, both in terms of his footballing ability and also with regards to the way that he carried himself on the pitch. And that was, in the aftermath of the news, I did a special tribute podcast with Jerome Sale for our BBC Radio Oxford pod. And that was kind of the thing that stood out. Like, he only had 2 loan spells at Oxford, yet his legacy at the club is as if he played 300 games for us. And that's because of the way that he performed on the pitch, where you kind of knew you were going to get a certain level of quality, but also effort. And a lot of other footballers, as fans, you look at them and you wonder if they understand how lucky they are to be a footballer and to wear the shirt of the team that you love. And with Baldock, you never ever felt that. And for him to have, for the tragedy to have happened, to leave behind his son who was turning 1, I think the day after he died, it's just absolutely tragic. And it's been a really difficult couple of weeks for the football family. And we're going to talk about other things that have happened in the last couple of weeks that are incredibly sad. So yeah, I mean, it's devastating, I think, for everybody who saw Baldock play for their team, but also in the wider footballing community too. And I'll be at Bramall Lane in a couple of weeks for Sheff United against Oxford, which I'm sure will be, at least in the run-up to kick-off, a huge, just a testament to the player and the man.
Portsmouth got their first win of the Championship season at Loftus Road on Saturday, beating QPR by 2-1. And from behind, Pompey going 1-0 down after their keeper Schmid came out to head a long ball forward and headed it straight to Karamoko Dembele, who promptly lobbed him to put QPR 1-0 up. But far be it from me to focus on one individual over what was a gritty, spirited comeback from the team. I think Callum Lang is the one to talk about here, because his performance for the rest of that first half in particular was like he himself had decided enough was enough when it came to Portsmouth's winless streak. First, with a great run, getting to the byline and fizzing the ball across. The cross was, I think, cut out but bobbled to Freddie Potts, who scored to equalise. And then it was Lang again showing, speed and intelligence, but also just pure desire to get to a ball in front of a dozing Morgan Fox, who tripped him for a penalty, which Lang himself then dispatched, looking very, very confident and very composed, despite the fact that Portsmouth have been desperate for this. And of course, for the first, 8 games, we kept bringing up how hard their fixture list was, and then they lost 6-1 to Stoke. And it was like, oh God, has their confidence been knocked so much that they are going to now struggle over the next portion of 8 games, even with easier fixtures. But I think this can suggest and lead to a bit of a sea change, and John Mousinho is certainly hopeful of that. I mean, QPR were pretty meek in response, and after this have hit the bottom of the Championship, and I find myself thinking about QPR quite a lot this weekend and wondering how it's come to this, when how many times did a Monday pod last season start with the words Martí Cifuentes? And how many times this season? Well, very, very few. So what do you think this is all about then, George? They started the season with one of those drawy records. 1 win, 1 defeat, 4 draws. And we always wonder, will those draws turn into wins or defeats? Because no team draws 2/3 of their games. Well, now it's 4 defeats in a row. Rock bottom.
Yeah, and this was a game, interestingly, between two sides who had both made moves to sign their manager down to long-term contracts, despite both starting the season relatively poorly. So with Cifuentes, at this stage, I don't think the tide has turned against him from the fans for the most part. Like, I think they still retain the faith that he's the right person to lead them on, especially, how could you not off the back end of last season? But anyone who thinks that this QPR start to the campaign is, isn't born out of poor performances is kidding themselves. This isn't a case of it's like a decent side who are underperforming, but the performances are okay. They're not getting the rub of the green. They're poor. Like, they are poor. And as I mentioned in the betting show, the players that they brought in, or maybe it was last Monday, the players that they brought in haven't settled at all. Dembele with the first goal here was a really nicely taken finish. But for the most part, the players haven't settled. And as we say, the defensive solidity that we saw at the back end of last season has gone. Individual errors, like, I don't know what Morgan Fox was doing, like for an experienced defender to be putting in that kind of challenge with the player running away from goal right on the edge of the penalty box is just so stupid, and it costs you the game effectively. So I'm pretty concerned about them. And when you've got a side who Normally what teams do is when this happens, is it's the manager who's the first on the chopping block, but they don't want to do that. They brought in a new sporting director last season who seemingly overseen the appointment of Sheff Wed and then the recruitment over the summer. But they've kind of put all their eggs in one basket now, and I don't know what changes they make beyond just trusting what Sheff Wed is going to do. But the flip of that is that Portsmouth are a team who did start poorly, who also retained faith in their manager in Rich Hughes, the man who's running the show on the football side of things. And what they changed is their system, and they're now playing 3 at the back, and that over the last 2 games has seen a massive improvement in performance level. And John Mousinho has come out and said after the game that even though it was kind of seen as being maybe a short-term fix, the way they're playing maybe suggests that this is what they want to do. So that's what QPR have to do. QPR have to find a way to get more out of individual players and find ways just to be more dominant within games, because right now it's, as I said, like they feel like a soft touch. They feel like a team that you want to play against right now.
Yeah, Josh Murphy, left wing back, is a hell of a call and seems to have helped get them over the line for their first win. I mean, QPR's open play XG4 is really poor, and that suggests that they just don't have any repeatable way of creating chances, basically outside of set pieces, where they've been pretty good this season. And that's not that different from the back end of last season, where it wasn't their attacking output that was getting them moving up the table in the right direction under Sheff Wed. He built from the back first, and we always referred to it last season because it was so quick and evident how well he'd got them structured out of possession. Second half of last season, only Leeds had a better defence in terms of XG against, but this season their XG against is just about worse than league average. So by no means horrendous, as you say, a lot of individual mistakes scuppering them, but still some slippage on that front without the boosting of their attacking numbers. So I do wonder if there was an idea of changing the style of play to make them a better attacking team over the summer, with a few different individuals brought in. It just hasn't really happened. And I look at the squad. You referred to Christian Nuri, who I think is CEO, but I think is basically doing sporting director type things. I don't think it's a very strong squad, and I say squad specifically because there is a starting 11 that I think is good, and we can be pretty confident that a back 4 of Dunn, Cook, Clark Salter and Kenneth Parle is pretty good, and they have been before under Sheff Wed. Sam Field +1 in midfield, a few different options, and then a 3 behind the striker of Smith, Dembele and Chair offers quite a few different aspects and a lot of creative quality and a bit of goal threat as well, a bit of pace in Smith's case. And then Frey up front, who's been pretty good as a target man and pretty hit and miss as a goal scorer. There's just so little outside of that at the moment. And some of those players are injury prone. Some of them are just getting flogged right now because there's no other viable option. So they're just having to play every single minute. It's a big few weeks for them. Their next 5 games are all against bottom half teams. And they really need to up their game to kind of demonstrate that they are not relegation fodder. Because at the moment, that is where they are. Cardiff 5, Plymouth, Argyle 0. These are 2 teams down the bottom as well. This was a huge win for Cardiff. More goals scored in one game than they had done in the first 9 league games. And I was watching this one and I was reminded of what I said about Argyle on the pod last week. We picked the most entertaining teams to watch from a neutral point of view. I said Argyle and Watford. And I said Argyle, you want to watch their games because their idea of a football match is basically you have a shot, we'll have a shot. And straight from the off, these 2 teams were playing in that nature, and I thought it was really good to watch. And it should be pointed out, given how dramatic the scoreline is, that Argyle had a huge chance early on through Obafemi, and it was a beautiful move through the thirds with great movement, and Obafemi stuck it wide. And then minutes later, bang, Alex Robinson curls home from range. Bang, Ruben Colwill scores to make it 2-0 down. And then a red card, George. It unravelled pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, it was a day where for Cardiff, everything came off. And that isn't to take any credit away from them, because the quality of the goals was unbelievable. Robertson's come in off the back of a decent loan spell at Pompey last year in League One, but he had his injury issues, and I think a product of playing in a struggling team means that Cardiff fans haven't really seen the best of him, but it was such a good finish. Whipped into the top left-hand corner to open the scoring. I thought Colwell's goal was probably the pick of the bunch in terms of an unbelievable first touch, an amazing second touch got out of his feet, and then he caresses the ball incredibly hard, which is quite a fun trait to have, into the far corner. I've got a bit of a issue with the red card where it doesn't matter, probably. Like, this isn't a point about the game. This isn't a reason for Cardiff fans to get annoyed with me. But I really hate the idea that Perry and G, I think even the most blue-tinted Cardiff fan will accept that Ng knew what he was doing when he rifled the ball into Sissoko on the floor. If you're lying on the floor and you haven't antagonised anyone and someone kicks a ball at you from point blank range, I think you are entitled, or it is acceptable, or at the very least understandable, that you would react to that. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, Sissoko's reaction was pretty bad, but like pretty tepid. Like, he gets up and basically grabs Ng by like the throat, doesn't headbutt him, doesn't push him. I mean, he kind of
grabs by the throat. Did you hear the words you just said?
It wasn't like a strangle. He just like grappled him as if to say, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And G goes down, and G gets a yellow card, and Sissoko gets a red card. Like, I personally don't think. I think if Sissoko gets up and like commits a crime, right?
But I think in the theatre, in the pantomime of football, and I definitely take your point, by the way. I think if you're getting up as a reaction to someone, even though you're seeing red, you still know what you can get away with and still make your point, and what you can't get away with and make your point. And he did something that you can't get away with.
But that is... So I would say, he's saying something you can't get away with, but that's taking out any... I'm saying it should be like nuanced. It should be accepting that he's seen red. He's not thinking rationally, but he's doing something that I think anyone would do. Right. But the key part to me is that red cards... Like, the purpose of red cards is basically always to be a deterrent, right? So you get a red card to punish people for doing stuff that's dangerous, that endangers the opposition, so they don't do it again. In this instance, who should be being deterred from their actions? Like, it's Ng, obviously. Whereas what happens now, Perry Ng is going to have walked in at half time, and he's going to have had most of his teammates like ruffling his hair and telling him well done. Nice. And I can guarantee that next time Ng has an opportunity to smack a ball into someone lying on the floor, he'll just do it. Like, why wouldn't he? Because he got a man sent off. So that's all. My point is, it's not about Ng, it's not about Sissoko, it's not about Argyle, it's not about Cardiff. It is that if you are giving red cards to someone for reacting in a way that doesn't really endanger the aggressor, but you're not punishing the aggressor, then I think that's the wrong way around.
Better not get on the wrong side of you during this pod. You'll have me up against the wall after this.
Well, I mean, I won't do anything that would hurt you.
Well, you'd only be doing what's in your nature if you get angry with me.
Yeah.
Grab my throat, by the sounds of things.
Like, a quick throat grab's right, isn't it?
A little throat grab. Yeah. Perfect.
El Ghazi, Robinson and Willock, again, with 3 quality finishes. And what is a great day for Cardiff. A really important day for Omaritza. My only thing is, I would probably say maybe don't give the caretaker the full-time job fresh off the back of a 5-0 win at home against a side who've already lost 4-0 at home to a relatively poor side, it turned out afterwards, who had 10 men for 50 minutes, 60 minutes. Maybe just give him a bit more time. Like, don't
Portsmouth at home on Tuesday.
Maybe don't do any more interviews with other people and say, like, Omar, this is yours, but we're going to give you another, like, 5 more games just to see if this is sustainable, rather than just give you a 3-year contract where we might think in a few weeks' time it was a bit early.
I completely agree. I was going to say the same thing. And that's not to say that he's not been very impressive in this caretaker regime so far. 2 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat, and showing Cardiff fans for the first time, possibly since I can remember, that they can play. Cardiff City can play good, fun, fluid attacking football with the ball on the floor, with super technical players doing technical things. It was really exciting seeing Colwill in a kind of free roll number 10 position, but drifting out to the right side mostly and combining with Ng and Tanner, who were holding the width on the right, having El Ghazi, and then off the left with Robinson kind of dropping deep at times and pulling centre-backs out of position. I thought it was really exciting, and obviously the jewel in the crown was the performance of Alex Robertson in midfield. Was absolutely excellent. Reza doing his job prospects a world of good, either at Cardiff or perhaps elsewhere. Him saying, I'm trying not to think too much of it. If I do things the right way, treat people the right way, I'll get my rewards further down the line, whenever that is. Quite right. There's a full slate in midweek, which means the return of our subscriber-only podcast, Under the Lights. This is for paid subscribers of NTT20.com. If you are a paid subscriber of NTT20.com, you get bonus podcasts every single week in the form of Dear Ali and George. You get another bonus podcast every time there are midweek fixtures. You also get at least 2 written pieces, quality, detailed, in-depth, insightful EFL coverage into your inbox. We think it's a really great offering for those of you who are obsessed with as much EFL content as you can stuff in your mouths. Under the Lights returns, and it'll be out on Wednesday around lunchtime. There are some massive games in the Championship in midweek. The bottom six all have fixtures against other bottom six teams. QPR against Coventry, Cardiff, Portsmouth, and Millwall, Plymouth. So there will be some relieved sets of fans after that. There'll be plenty of panic buttons being pushed as well, I think it's fair to say. Luton beat Watford 3-0. George, goodness me, they needed this one. What a way to win back some love from that fan base by beating your big rivals by 3-0. Squashing them, really. Squashing them.
This was so important. This was a game between two rivals, but a rivalry where one set of fans and the general perception of one team was that they were going to struggle, and they've started the season very well, and the other, they were a newly relegated Premier League team who were unlucky to get relegated, who started the season poorly. And had Luton lost this game, you have to have worried for Rob Edwards as to what it would have meant. But they came into the game and it felt like a bit of a throwback performance, I would say. It felt like any attempts to try and change the style of play that got them to where they were previously, where we've seen them in some games look to play a bit more, went out the window. I think probably the quite chaotic nature of a derby suited them really well, where they were really aggressive out of possession, they were really direct in possession, and a bit of luck that went their way, because at times this season it's felt like things haven't necessarily gone to plan. But the first goal from Clark, basically he tries to get his leg out of the way and it ricochets off the underside of his thigh and deflects into the back of the net, and that's kind of what they needed. Carlton Morris, who's been out for the majority of the season, and when he played, he came off the bench, scored a brace before getting injured again. His return to the side is marked with a goal. Adebayo looked much sharper. I know he's still yet to score this season. Had a good shot saved before Jacob Brown, who spent most of the season injured, came off the bench and scored with a decent finish late on to make the game safe. They were the better side. They created the better chances. And this has to be the performance, I guess, that will give them belief that they can put their start to the season behind them. And with key players back into the fold and back fit, there's no reason why they can't do that. I still maintain quite a high level of concern for Watford, despite their good points tally. I still think defensively they're a bit of a mess, and they concede loads of opportunities within games, and they couldn't really force themselves into this one at all against Luton side, who defensively have been very, very poor. So Luton will hope this is a turning point for them, and Watford will hope that it's not a turning point for them.
One great last-ditch tackle from Mark McGuinness, and I think that's worth pointing out because I've seen him getting quite a lot of stick in the last few weeks. I've been quite surprised. The Luton games that I've watched, I haven't felt like Mark McGuinness was a cause of their problems necessarily. I don't think his performances have necessarily merited the scrutiny, but I suppose when you think about it, it's the reality of a big transfer fee for a centre-back at this level. Basically, if people see your team conceding a lot of goals and you're the one that's been signed for a big fee, then you'll be the focus. I happen to think that most of Luton's defensive issues so far this season have come ahead of the back line, have been basically failings of the midfielders and the attackers in the press as much as major issues at the back. And they're not helped by the fact that they seem to get an injury at the back every single game, which is just absolutely astounding. And they're still picking up injuries. It's bizarre. But hopefully, because it's good to watch a Luton team playing like that, they will continue with this as the blueprint. Two up top. Start there and work backwards. Adebayo and Morris, with Brown there, with Taylor there as well. You've got a great squadron there to play two up top. The wing-backs, Doughty and Victor Moses, pretty damn good at this level. And then they've got loads of midfield options when everyone's fit to give them that sort of intensity in the legs that they've always played with in the last few years in the Championship, with a bit of quality in there as well, whether it's Chong or Clark or others who play a bit deeper. It was a fantastic day, and there haven't been many of them this season for Luton. There was an incredible away performance and victory up at Middlesbrough from Bristol City, who went and won 2-0. Now, at the end of last week, Bristol City released a statement to say that their manager, Liam Manning, will take a period of absence following the death of his baby son, Theo. Just pretty much the saddest thing imaginable, really. His assistant and close friend, Chris Hogg, took the team for this game at Middlesbrough, and you can only imagine what a difficult time that has been for the whole club, as well as, of course, the Manning family. And it was, I think, a very emotional away end that witnessed a wonderful and sort of spirited away win. It did follow a certain Middlesbrough defeat blueprint. For Borough, start brightly, miss a few decent chances, go behind, miss a few more decent chances, concede again, miss a few chances at 2-0. It is getting pretty laughable. But from a Bristol City point of view, they are consistently good against larger teams, so to speak, or teams that are well fancied, whether it's in cup competitions last season against Premier League teams, whether it's against some of the leading lights in this division. They seem so comfortable defending in a certain shape, but not just defending and trying to keep clean sheets, but defending in a way and pressing at the right times to give themselves opportunity in transition. And it's no surprise that both goals had Jason Knight leading the turnovers. He is the Championship's great pickpocket, isn't he? And for both goals, that was the case. It actually reminded me a bit of on my 21st birthday, I was walking down Victoria Street in London. I think I was going to buy a new pair of shoes, and I was looking.
I did eat that night, didn't I?
Yeah, I think you did.
At a Italian place called Pizza Express.
Incredible. I'd forgotten that detail. I think I was a little traumatized because of what happened. I picked up my phone to change the song that I was listening to. Corded headphones in those days, none of this wireless stuff.
Corded.
And wired, I should say.
Yeah.
And
how big was this wire?
Suddenly, the phone wasn't in my hand anymore, and I was so confused. And someone had cycled past and swiped it, had grabbed it, and before I could basically work out what happened, they'd gone.
Did you shout, "Oi, it's my birthday"?
I probably did, yeah. What, like when Palace sacked Trevor Francis in 2003, and apparently he just went, "But it's my birthday."
Incredible.
Yes, anyway, so let's just rewind a bit. That's what Middlesbrough must have felt like when Jason Knight nicked the ball twice and set up 2 goals for them. It is a fantastic away win for Bristol City. For Borough, I'm not really sure what the answer is at this stage. Like, sack the manager, not for me personally. I come round to the fact that if I was a fan of Borough, I'd be so bored of the same thing happening so frequently for now quite a long period of time that I might decide that I just want something different, anything, even if it's not as good or even if it's not better. I wouldn't necessarily be going down that path. New players is another option. You know, Borough's recruitment strategy has been widely lauded, I would suggest, over a few windows and a few years. But they've skewed fairly young, and maybe there's an aspect of youth and inexperience that is coming out in a lack of composure at the top of the pitch. People like Latalath, who has clear qualities but who hasn't shown consistent goal scoring ability, only in flashes. Maybe get a bit nastier. Are they a bit nice? Are they that sort of pretty passing team that's a bit nice? And what does that actually mean in reality? Does that mean swapping out one of your midfielders, Morris and Hackney, for someone with a bit more grit, a bit more experience, more of a tackler than a passer? Does it mean getting older defenders or older midfielders? A big old number 9, like a 30-year-old grizzled number 9. I don't know.
It's difficult to have like a post-mortem on Borough after a game like this is hard because they dominated the ball, they dominated territory, they missed loads of opportunities at 0-0 and a 1-0, and it's one of those games where, you know, Latalath puts them ahead after 0-0, they go 1-0 up, they probably win it fairly comfortably. Like, I watched Chris Hoggs.
But why doesn't Latalath put them ahead at 0-0 consistently? Not him specifically, but why does it happen more to them than anyone else? Do you know why it happens more to them than anyone else?
I watched Chris Hoggs' post-match interview, and he basically said, as much as I agree with you that this is the kind of blueprint of the game that Bristol City normally thrive in, he was like, I want the ball. We were meant to look after the ball. We were meant to try and dominate the ball, and we just couldn't do that because Borough don't let you do that, to paraphrase him. He was like, I went to bed last night with a very different way that I thought this game was going to go, and it ended up going that way. And he was like, even at half-time, I said, let's go out there and let's dominate, and then we couldn't because they were too good, and they just had the ball the whole time. So, like, even though they've lost the game, Borough, Hoggs there being like, we could not implement our game plan because they're too good. at controlling the game, which is interesting. Like, obviously that doesn't win you any points. When you get caught or get pickpocketed by Jason Knight twice and you concede twice, it doesn't help you at all. But there's something within that. I think looking at Borough and Carrick as like a longer piece is more interesting, where if you start the Championship table on July the 1st, 2023, and you take out the promoted sides, so all the teams who played 56 games, Borough are currently 4th. Leeds have got 109 points in those 56 games. West Brom next, 93 points. Norwich, 89 points. Borough, 83 points. That puts Borough 1 point ahead of Hull, who sacked the manager Liam Rosenior last summer. It puts them 5 points ahead of Sunderland, whose manager issues over that period of time we know very well. It puts them, Bristol City are 2 further points behind Sunderland, so it puts them 7 points ahead of Bristol City, who sacked Nigel Pearson and brought in Liam Manning. Preston, 8 points above Preston, who of course sacked the manager early this season too. So what you're seeing there is all the teams just beneath Borough, all of whom I would say have, like, the resource-wise and ambition-wise, would sit below Borough, have already taken their performance level and decided that it's not good enough and they have to make a change. And in my mind, Michael Carrick has credit in the bank for probably 2 or 3 reasons. One is that they are very good in possession, and they are very good basically between both boxes. Then there's no denying that he takes credit for that, because realistically, Michael Carrick cannot help his players missing opportunities. Like, that's not his job. And secondly, because he's Michael Carrick, I would say that plays a big part in it, and that he's still perceived as being someone who's going to go to the very top. It's his first job, amazing football pedigree and everything else. But also, I think he has massive credit in the bank for that incredible run when he first took over, where he took Borough from the bottom end of the Championship and took them to the brink of automatic promotion. And at some point, surely that has to go. Like, surely at some point we have to be like, that maybe that was quite weird, and that was just one of those weird runs that you can't really account for, and now we're seeing the reality. So it's kind of a bit baffling. I don't know what to make of Michael Carrick's management career. It still wouldn't surprise me at all if he has a successful one, but 56 games is quite a big sample size now, where a lot of other teams around them have decided that they've seen enough and it's not good enough.
There's another point which, I'll be honest, I thought you were going to make, which is they've got the 3rd best XG ratio in the league this season, and they are 9th with 4 wins, 2 draws, and 4 defeats. Yeah. Not disastrous results, and they're 5 points off 3rd, 4 points off the playoffs, and if they win 3 in a row, they'll probably be in the playoffs and looking upwards.
Yeah.
That's another point. Tell me about Hull 0, Sunderland 1, Sunderland winning on Sunday.
Sunderland
by a goal to 0.
Quite a weird game, this. I kind of thought, if you looked at Hull's last 4 games, there have been 4 goals in 3 of them and 5 in the other. And, you know, we've been told so much about Tim Volter and his style of football that I kind of thought maybe we were finally seeing it. And I wrote a nice preview piece for AK Bets about this game, being like, finally, Hull are going to be crazy and we're going to see loads of goalmouth action. It's going to be really end-to-end. And in the first half, Hull basically barely got anywhere near Sunderland's goal. From an attacking point of view, it was really, really desperate. And the game itself was relatively without, there wasn't really much going on. Frankly, it was a 0-0 that looked like it was going to end 0-0. Only for a couple of moments in the game to change that in the second half, with Bedia rifling a really well-struck shot off the crossbar, and then a Sunderland goal coming from a Hull corner, where the quality of the goal is what we should focus on first, because Wilson Isidore gets on the ball very, very deep, and he has the pace and then the skill to both kind of shrug off the defender and then clip the ball beautifully over the keeper to make it 1-0. There was some controversy because Andy Madley basically stood his ground as the corner was rolled towards him and kind of shielded the ball from the Hull player. I don't think there's anything he can really do about that. Like, I think it wasn't particularly good from him, but I don't think he can blow himself up and be like, sorry lads, sorry, I got in the way.
One of the lines I read, which I loved, I think there was a suggestion from Hull's side that he should know that they played their corners to that part, that they play them short, and he should have done his research and know that was a bad place to stand, which, frankly, I mean, yeah, it would be amazing if he did know that, and he might not have stood there. But it also feels like quite a bit of a push, bit of a stretch.
Watch our games, mate.
Also, like the player did receive the ball and had like 2 touches before he lost it.
Although I do kind of also think that it probably did make his job look quite a lot harder to receive it late. But I mean, it kind of, I can understand why if you're a Hull.
I was more upset about Chris Mepham's handball.
I was going to say that's the one that I think is completely fair, where the only occasion in the first half of note was a long ball over the top, and Mepham kind of put his arm out as was it Berdier running onto it, so Bloomy running onto the ball, and Mepham puts his arm out and it quite clearly strikes the hand and then rolls through to Patterson. And I think it's probably just outside the box, but I think you could probably make a case for it being a red card for
certainly.
For preventing a goal scoring opportunity. So I can understand the frustration there. Also Kamara with one counter-attacking chance where he picked the wrong ball. But Hull were pretty poor, and it was Sunderland who probably had the better opportunities to make it 2-0. Sunderland continuing to show their credentials as being one of the teams who could well be chasing down Leeds at the back end of the season, in my view. For Hull, frustration that after a couple of games that suggested they might be hitting their straps, it's back-to-back defeats without scoring against Norwich and against Sunderland.
12 of 20 outfielders in this game, aged 22 or under, split evenly, 6 for each side. So certainly one to watch for sort of youth development purposes. Sheffield Wednesday 0, Burnley 2, George.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday will feel mightily aggrieved at this one. I mean, this is... I don't want to kind of stick the boot into Burnley too much because they did turn it on later on in the game, but how Burnley didn't go behind in this game, I have absolutely no idea. By the time Jayden Anthony scored, from what was like a really poor error from Valerie, where he basically shanked a ball at the back, which went into Anthony's pass, who finished it well. But Wednesday had already had so many opportunities to take the lead and had missed them all. Danny Ryle after the game spoke about it. He basically said that he felt like they played really well and hadn't got their rewards for it. Brownhill scoring the goal just after half-time to make it 2-0. This was very un-Burnley-like, where, in my mind, Burnley this season have been able to... the goals that they've scored have basically been moments of real quality from range, even though they still had 6 shots from about 30 yards in the game, so not really changing their tactic there. The 2 goals they scored were well taken, close range finishes from Brownhill and Anthony. But crucially, Burnley have been really good this season, and a key reason why they've amassed so many points, despite some pretty blunt attacking displays, has been their defensive work, where they've been really, really solid at the back. But Sheffield Wednesday had no issues whatsoever creating chances against them. The worst miss was probably the Ugbo header over the bar, but they had quite a few of them. Bannon still looking very dangerous, especially with the set-piece delivery. So definitely signs, with Wednesday's performances early in the campaign, I was worried that they were really bad consistently. And I think we're now seeing a level of performance that's much, much better. For Burnley, that they, as I say, they're racking up the points pretty quickly. But they're second in the league currently behind Sunderland on 21 points. I'm definitely not sold yet. I think they will go through, unless they improve, I think they're going to go through a period fairly soon where they're not picking up as wins so freely. Not picking up as wins so freely.
Yeah.
You can just say words, can't you?
I liked it. Preston beat Coventry 1-0. Good performance and win, I think, from PNE here. They did need one big save from Freddie Woodman in injury time. What a save it was, too, from a Thomas header. But that was Coventry's only shot on target in the whole game, and PNE created plenty themselves. Their goal from Emil Rees, and that means that under Heckingbottom, 7 league games in charge, they've only lost 2 of them, and at home, 3 wins and 1 draw so far under Hecky. Deepdale has been a bit of a fortress, and I think when you consider the state of distress that the club seemed to be in after 1 game of the season, when Ryan Lowe walked, it's pretty impressive from Paul Heckingbottom. I also think if you look at the 2 defeats that they've suffered under him, one of them at Oxford, I think in front of your eyes.
I was there,
one
They only lose to great teams.
Yeah, one at Watford. I think that you could, if you're being generous, put those away defeats down to kind of being part of a teething process, if you like, because you talked about how aggressive they were out of possession in a way that really surprised you at the start of that Oxford game. And in the end, they lose a bit of their shape and they get picked off and they concede 3 goals. The same happened at Watford. But I do wonder if Hecky's trying to transition the style of the team, try and make them more of an aggressive, ambitious team in and out of possession, and maybe those sorts of results are going to happen away from home. But I think overall it's a good approach, and I think it's bearing fruit because, this was a well-deserved 1-0 win that probably could have been more. I think the attacking play has been massively improved upon in the last month or so. And the last 3 games have been just 3 really impressive performances, basically. 3-0 win against Watford in the midweeks, the 0-0 at Burnley, and now the 1-0 here. I think, defensively, 3 clean sheets, can't ask much more than that. But also in terms of what they're doing with the ball, it's kind of a 3-6-1, 3-2-4-1, whatever people call it. Basically a boxing midfield with Ledson and Ali McCann as combative sixes, and then Thordarson and Frokjær Jensen as Scandi number 10s, and Emil Rees through the middle with Kessler Hayden and Robbie Brady as wing backs, Jordan Storey, Liam Lindsay and Andrew Hughes as centre backs, and Woodman in goal. I think it's a nice way to approach games. They're one of the few teams still playing 3 at the back, and that could be to their benefit, having a point of difference. I certainly like the way that team looks on paper, and clearly they're playing pretty well at the moment. So, yeah, feeling good about Preston and Hecky at the moment. As for Coventry, Charlie sent in a Sunday scouting report saying, another depressing afternoon watching Coventry City play. First shot and only shot on target in the 92nd minute. Style of play non-existent. Robbins getting into it with a fan after the final whistle. All very grim. Big few weeks for Coventry and Mark Robbins. If you've ever wondered about how we put this show together in terms of research, like George pulling up some mad league table that starts at the start of last season but doesn't include any of the teams that have gone up. A 56-game league table. How does he do that? Well, it's that Ipswich fan website, isn't it?
Doesn't lie, does it?
TWTD?
twtd.co.uk. I'm not going to read all the forward slashes because we'll be here all day.
But the point is, last week we published on ntt20.com, free for everyone to read, a research Bible, basically listing all of our favourite football research resources. Say that 3 times quickly. And TWTD was on it. The Fishy, a Grimsby forum, has one incredible and completely unique statistical offering, which I'm not going to give away. And then there's some more standard stuff like Soccer Stats and Transfermarkt and VOTMob and things of that nature. And it's gone down really well. I think people found it quite helpful to learn about a lot of places where we would get information that turns into pod. So please go to ntt20.com to read that. George, Blackburn beat Swansea 1-0, and it means they've won all 5 home games so far this season at Ewood Park. They only won 6 last season. And it also means that their 18 points from 10 games is their best start to a season in modern Championship history, equaling their record in the second tier of 18 points in 1989-90.
Yeah, this was... it kind of went by the book, I guess, to an extent, where... It feels to me like Swansea at the moment are a team who are putting in some decent performances and getting basically nothing for it. And this was another one of those where Tyree Sterling put Rovers ahead. I think from a corner defending perspective, if the first contact on a corner is Tyree Sterling volleying it, then you're probably not doing your job particularly well.
Yeah.
Even though I think it deflected off Maktar Gay, who seemed kind of half-heartedly try and claim it before.
Who have they given it to? Opta. What's it down as? Dolan?
Dolan, yeah.
I don't think... I think it might have come off a defender. Really? I was really confused about this goal.
I mean, Gay definitely...
There are 3 potential options. It's either OG, Gay, or Dolan. Gay definitely trying to claim it.
Yeah.
Dolan's tried to claim it and been given it.
Yeah.
I think it might have actually been an own goal.
Well, if you think it's an own goal, I think it's Dolan's. I think the shot has to be on target.
Yeah.
Probably.
Fair enough.
So I think there are 2 options. But Swansea had a lot of the ball after that, as you would imagine they would. Didn't create loads, but, Blackburn were able to see it out relatively well, as you would kind of expect a John Eustace side to do. I think I probably thought we would see more Rovers wins like this, where they get ahead, they sit in a bit deeper and let the opposition have it, and they see it out, not without some moments of discomfort. The one thing I would say is that Todd Cantwell, he's still good, mate. Yeah, he's still good at football.
He looks like he's loving it as well.
I know, and I loved. This is one of those where it's proper like Premier League energy where Rovers fans like swooning over his performance, and he does a post-match interview where he's like, "Yeah, I'm nowhere near it.
Yeah,
I'm nowhere near it yet. Like, I'm nowhere near 100%. Like, I'm going to be when I get there.
Yeah,
it's going to be really good."
Well, he's always had Premier League energy.
Yeah,
just not always played like a Premier League player.
No.
We got some draws as well. Millwall 1, Derby 1. Ivanovic. Ivanovic. The 19-year-old Serb, Millwall's record transfer, signed on deadline day, scoring his first goal
Branislav's son
to equalise. But he doesn't love Branislav. He likes Mitro. Did the Mitro celebration, which I liked. A nice reference to a great Serbian goal scorer that's probably a real idol of his. He's
it's
tall.
Not his son, I should say before.
He's not his son. No. He's tall. He's 19. He scored 9 in the Serbian top flight last season. He's now Millwall's. And after Langstaff had quite a few chances and went very close, working hard, but didn't finish them, Ivanovic came off the bench and rounded the goalkeeper to equalise. Jerry Yates had also scored his first goal for Derby County to put them ahead. First point of the season on the road for Derby County, but not able to hold on. Oxford 1, West Brom 1. George, Oxford United haven't lost a game at home in the Championship for 25 years.
Yeah, that's a stupid stat, isn't it?
And they still haven't, because Dane Scarlett nicked a point late doors.
Great header.
The long throw yellows.
What's quite funny is that Darnell Furlong signed a new contract last week, and to announce it, West Brom tweeted a photo of Darnell Furlong mid-long throw and said, "You can all look forward to plenty more of these." And everyone was like, yeah, you can on Saturday.
Will Volk's new contract needed, I think, just for the content. Yeah, very resilient as ever. Oxford stayed in the game when I think West Brom had quite a lot of it in terms of possession and territory and threat, and got their rewards. I chuckled when I think it was Gary Weaver on comms doing his big final whistle soliloquy. When the point of his bit was that Oxford is still unbeaten at home this season and they'd saved their record. And one of the lines he used was, "This is a stadium like no other."
Correct.
Literally true.
It's the worst.
But it's missing a stab.
It's terrible.
I really liked his spin on it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Don't take it as a negative.
I'm going to be
it as
there
a positive.
tomorrow night.
Oh,
I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Derby at home.
The wind will be whipping around with its.
Is it windy tomorrow?
With its entrance point at the far end of the ground.
I would say the wind at the Oxford Stadium, I'm going to call it, doesn't whip. It just goes straight down. It's a tunnel.
And Stoke 1, Norwich 1. We saw Ante Tsirnats put Norwich ahead. We saw another left footer off the right, Million Manhoef, equalise with a shot that I've seen Norwich fans suggest that Angus Gunn might have saved. George Long did not save it, and that is potentially an issue for them if Gunn remains sidelined for a while. Johansson in the Stoke goal made some great saves, and I think just generally a game where both teams had some spells and it finished 1-1. And, that's life, that's football. Under the Lights returns this week. That's our midweek fixture podcast for paid subscribers of NTT20.com. Some big games, particularly down the bottom of the Championship. First episode went down really well, so thank you to those who messaged and listened. It's for paid subs on NTT20.com, so if you'd like to listen to our midweek recap pod, make sure that you are one of those. We're in League One now, where my good friend and pretty good colleague George Elek spent all week on the Monday, the State of the Nation pod. Cambridge aren't as bad as everyone thinks, even though they haven't won a game this season. On the betting show, what's your nap? What's your best bet of the weekend? Cambridge are going to win their first game of the season at home to Wigan, who've kept 6 clean sheets in a row at 9-4. And guess what happened? Cambridge won 2-0. They are capable.
Your friend sounds cool.
They are capable.
Yeah, I mean, this was it went so perfectly in terms of just the silliness of football, where that I'd said how unlucky they'd been, how they'd seen stupid goals go against them. They'd seen Sam Nombe score off his bum and all this stuff, and then they score after 5 minutes with Kachunga just kind of a shot just hitting him and diverting into the goal, and that's like 1-0. And they score a second because a long-range shot from Evans ricochets off the post, hits Sam Tickle in the face and goes in the goal. 2-0. What else do you need?
Well, part of your whole point was about variance in football. And sometimes that comes down to essentially luck, George.
But also
luck, which they have not had. And here they had it all.
But essentially also because I think from a defensive perspective, Cambridge are not a bad team. And I know that might sound weird about a team who hadn't won a game before this. but they don't concede many chances in games. They haven't really conceded many goals apart from the 4 against Blackpool. And they're up against a Wigan side who really struggled for attacking output. Like, this is the 5th game out of 6 that Wigan haven't scored in. And that was the key here, because even at 2-0, like, you would think that a team who hadn't won all season would, at 2-0, drop in and struggle to see out the game. They were the better side. They were still the better side at 2-0. Wigan didn't really get particularly close to scoring throughout the game. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Cambridge went on a bit of a run at some point now. I'm not saying I think they'll stay up or anything like that, but they're not as bad as their early results have been, and I'm delighted for their fans that they were able to get a big win.
At the other end of the table, Birmingham got another 3 points at Lincoln, a 3-1 win, despite, not for the first time this season, giving their opposition a goal head start. Lincoln had scored within the first minute, played a sort of Brentford-style kick-off. Tom Hamer, who's very good in the air, plays at the back for them, was basically at the very top of the pitch, challenging for that very first aerial duel with the ball forward. Led to a throw-in, which was launched into the box, found itself at the feet of Bailey Cadamartri, who I think is a very, very good finisher for someone of his age, someone I'm very excited about. Put them ahead. But it wasn't a glorious Imps victory, because Birmingham came back into the game. They got control, they got their territory, and they got goals from great finishes from the great players that they have. Keshi Anderson came to the party to the tune of 2 goals, the first and the third. Willem Tor Willemsen scored Birmingham's second with a really nice finish. At 2-1, Lincoln won a penalty. Rico Hackett hadn't made an appearance this season, came on as a sub. First action was to take a penalty. His first touch of the season, saved by Ryan Alsop, and Blues went 3-1 up not long after that. So big win for Birmingham, and we think a good time to dig a little deeper into Birmingham. Hit the FOTMob corner button. We're going to use FOTMob's database of stats and visualizations, which covers the Championship, League 1, League 2, and so many other leagues across the world, to dig into Birmingham's performances behind the results, because you can't argue with the results. 25 points from 10 games is an astounding start to the season in terms of points return. And there's a lot of focus on them at League One level. There's a lot of expectation on them at League One level due to the way that they've approached being at this level for the first time in a long time. And so far, it could barely be going any better. Just 1 defeat to Charlton just before the international break, the only blot really on the copybook. And that's with a pretty difficult fixture list as well. They've played 4 teams in the current top 7. They've beaten all of those 4. They've also played Charlton, Peterborough and Rotherham, who pre-season were among the favourites for promotion, albeit haven't started that strongly. Against that group, they've won 2 against Posh and Rotherham and lost that game against Charlton. We're going to talk about the playing style, which is pretty extreme. They want to dominate. They want to control. That's probably the better word, control. They want to control possession of the ball. They want to control the territory of the pitch. They want complete control of the pitch. And they have the highest average possession in the EFL, ahead of Notts County and MK Dons in League 2, Crawley in League 1, and Swansea in the Championship. And when we talk about teams that play like this, I think there's always a lot of focus, probably disproportionately, on possession-based football as an attacking approach. We often talk about it being quite stale and quite boring, quite slow, and not maybe as exciting as more direct and quicker attacking play. I think this style is as much about defending as it is about attacking. It is much, when I talk about control of the ball, that doesn't mean in order to be the best attacking team, it's in order to be the best team in the league. And the defensive side of that is very, very important. The theory loosely being, if we have the ball, you are not attacking us. And if we lose the ball in your final third with so many players in attack because we've built through the thirds, we then have an opportunity to win it back quicker, put you under pressure in vulnerable areas, and you are still, on a very basic level, a long way away from our goal. So in order for you to get to our goal, even without many defenders back, you're going to need to play your cards pretty well. One thing I find interesting about Birmingham so far this season is that they've scored the joint most goals per game in League One, joint with Wycombe, and they've conceded only the 7th least. So 6 teams have conceded fewer goals than Blues per game. But I believe the system being implemented by Chris Davis has been more effective from a defensive point of view, actually, than from an attacking point of view. I think that the system is their strongest defender at the moment, and the reason that 6 teams have conceded fewer goals than them is actually mostly down to individual mistakes that I think can be rubbed out a little bit. However, going forward, there are certainly some things to look at, which I think you'll probably be looking at. It's in analysing the goals that they've conceded this season that actually gives me confidence that Birmingham are probably going to have a string of clean sheets coming up soon, even though they've looked a little bit leaky on paper. You can split the goals they've conceded pretty neatly into three categories: set-piece concessions, counter-attacking goals, and goalkeeper howlers, right? So 4 set-piece goals, a long throw against Lincoln, a long throw against Charlton, a corner against Peterborough, a corner against Wrexham. And they do look vulnerable from those situations, and that is not ideal. I would also say that the level of dominance and control that they have means they're not a team that have to face that many set pieces compared to others, but still something that definitely needs to be sorted. Then there's goalkeeper howlers, and Bailey Peacock Farrell needs to be brought up here. He was their starting goalkeeper. 3 goals conceded can be traced pretty simply back to him. He was tackled by Ricky J. Jones of Peterborough into the net. Tello Asgard of Wigan had a shot from outside the box, which went through his hands and into the net. And against Leyton Orient, he was tackled by the attacker, and Orient got basically a freebie goal. 2 counter-attack goals, 3 rather. 2 against Wickham, second day of the season. 1 against Reading on opening day was a quick transition, a through ball to Big Kelvin. But those counter-attacking issues seem to have been mostly wiped out. They haven't conceded on the break since the second match. As for the goalkeeper errors, well, Peacock Farrell's been dropped now. Ryan Alsop has come in, saved a penalty here against Lincoln, hasn't made any egregious mistakes yet. So that category of goals, I think, can basically be improved upon, ignored now. And so for me, it's just set pieces, basically. And I don't expect them to concede one every single game, as seems to be the case at the moment. So I think it's kind of interesting to me that although the numbers, the bare goals and goals conceded numbers don't suggest this, my personal take is that the way that they're playing at the moment has allowed them to be an incredibly strong team out of possession. But still, despite having scored the joint most goals in the league, probably a bit more work to do in possession.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it. From an attacking point of view, they are very intriguing. I think for an outsider who doesn't pore over these kind of stats like we do every Monday morning, the assumption must be, you look at their results, you look at the odds, you look at the league table, well, Birmingham are going to walk the league. They might walk the league. They might be the best team in the league by miles. But I think my perspective is that it's not quite as simple as that, and that there is reason to think that at some point they might, unless they improve, have a bit of a sticky run, and that is because of their current attacking output. Like if you look at the expected goals table in League One so far this season with FOTMOB, you can see that they sit in 7th, 14.2 expected goals, 20 scored. So their expected goals number is the same as Bolton and Mansfield, who are both also outperforming with 17 and 17. If you look at Rotherham, who are top 18.2, who are massively underperforming their expected goals, that's 4 expected goals more than Birmingham. So I think if you had a team who were exceptional from an attacking standpoint, you would expect them to be higher than that, albeit with the quality of player they have at their disposal. It's probably not a massive surprise maybe that they are overperforming their XG. But this is more to do with trends in my mind rather than taking the season as a whole, where if we look at, I'll caveat it by saying the Huddersfield game, they were very, very impressive. They have been an impressive attacking team at times this season. But if you look at individual games, they went 2-0 down against Peterborough and brought the game back to 3-2. You can see here, like you can see from their expected goals number of 1.05, it wasn't constant pressure whatsoever, but they got over the line. Then against Charlton in the 1-0 defeat, as we spoke about at the time, just 3 shots in the whole game, 0.13 expected goals. And then on Saturday, they go to Lincoln, they win 3-2. Again, you see they've scored 2 of their 6 shots, amounting to 0.72 XG. So even though, apart from the Charlton game, they lose 1-0, which I think could be a warning sign of things to come, you have 3 games in their last 4 where they have, from an attacking perspective, really struggled to either create high quality attacking chances, or frankly a high volume of chances where you'd expect them to get way more shots off than they are doing at the moment. Now, looking at Saturday's game in particular, there is no doubt, and I watched the extended highlights back, that Birmingham got into loads of dangerous areas without getting shots away, partly down to, there was one brilliant tackle from Paulie O'Connor, which prevented him from getting a shot off. And there will be an element to that where, threats can't always be measured in pure shots. But I would put my neck on the line and say if they keep posting similar XG numbers and similar shot maps to what we've seen in those 3 games, then there's no way they maintain their current level of form. So it's just something, there's every chance they improve. We've seen already this season, the Wrexham game, the Huddersfield game, that they can be a really consistently threatening attacking side. But there are just a couple of tiny red flags that suggest to me that it may not quite be as easy as everyone expects it to be. Although, having said that, I'm struggling to see where the quality teams are behind them in order to push them all the way.
Really interesting to be able to use a FOTMob to dig deeper into results, deeper into performance, and try and pick out some bits and bobs to talk to you about each week on FOTMob Corner. Please do make sure you check out FOTMob, and you can do so by downloading the app using the link that's there in the show notes. Now, Wrexham got a big win at Rotherham, and they had to hold on for a full match minus 16 seconds. Because that's how long it took them to go ahead. Paul Mullin with the goal, but created by my sweet, sweet prince, Ryan Barnett.
Great ball, great finish. I love a highlight that starts with kickoff. Yeah. It's always fun. And that's what this was with, I think, both Mullin and Palmer, who took the kickoff, both touched the ball in the build-up to the goal as well, which is quite fun.
Oh, nice.
Well, as in Palmer touching the build-up, and then Mullin finished it off. So they took the lead up within a minute, going away to Rotherham and taking the lead with like an attritional kick-off routine is quite fun. And they saw it out relatively comfortably. Mullin nearly scored himself, but Rotherham, as you'd expect at home, being 1-0 down within a minute, had plenty of opportunities themselves, but they weren't able to take any of them. So still pretty concerned for Rotherham, who seem unable to really find their form, despite posting some good attacking numbers, as we mentioned a second ago, which would suggest that it's probably going to come at some point. But yeah, for Wrexham, it's a really big positive result up against a side who, despite their kind of middling start, with Steve Evans, they're going to make life difficult for you. Important as well for Mullin to get off the mark. He missed much of the start of the season due to fitness issues, and with Jack Marriott and Palmer playing so well, struggled to really get into the side. So important that he is back into the team. I have no doubt that he will start scoring now that you'd think, made that starting berth his own.
Mansfield-Stevenage was an interesting one ahead of the weekend, very much so post-weekend as well. Stevenage going to Mansfield and winning 1-0. Now, the goal was spectacular, and it is worthy of taking up the whole discussion of the game, practically. A free kick from Jake Young that reminded us, as if we'd forgotten the start of last season in League Two, that Jake Young can score spectacular goals. It was an absolutely brilliant strike past Crispy Pim. Crispy Pim! Crispy. Wow, I must be hungry. Sounds like a sort of potential Chinese dish, that.
Crispy Pim.
Crispy Pim pancakes. And instead of just focusing on Jake Young's goal, I'd like to basically highlight the fact that Stevenage were the better side at 0-0 in this game, and the better side in the first half, Young having scored after 32 minutes. I think that's really important to highlight, because there's a way that you might have expected Stevenage to go to an in-form Mansfield side and win 1-0 that could have been smashy and grabby. But I think the fact that they very clearly had the better game plan at 0-0, created more opportunities at 0-0 and went ahead at half-time is really important when we're trying to rate all of these teams that are in that kind of 4th to 12th range at the moment in League One. We're trying to work out which of the teams that are in the top 6 at the moment, or the top 10, that weren't necessarily expected to be playoff chasers, which of them have legs, have staying power. And we're talking about Wycombe and Mansfield and Exeter and Lincoln and Stevenage as well. And the fact that they were the better side at 0-0, I think, continues to reflect well on the manager and the team he has at his disposal. Now, if you look at the match stats overall, you'll see that Mansfield end up with more shots, and so it might look a bit more even. But I think that's kind of a fairly, pretty much to be expected in the second half. And Stevenage hung on. They restricted them to not many clear-cut chances, and Mansfield didn't take any of their chances. And Stevenage leave with all 3 points, with their 7th clean sheet of the season, which is the joint most in League One with Exeter City, who've also kept 7 clean sheets. They did so on Thursday night live on Sky against Shrewsbury Town. Kamari Doyle exploiting a mistake at the back after Shrews had started pretty well, to be honest, to fire Exeter head with another excellent strike. Kamari Doyle's 3rd of the season, making a bit of a habit of that. And then Josh McGuinness, big Josh McGuinness, getting a goal in the second half to make it 2-0 and a good win for Exeter. And I'm really desperate not to talk about Joe Whitworth, the Exeter goalkeeper, on loan from Crystal Palace, because I've talked about Joe Whitworth every single Monday for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But until Joe Whitworth...
There's loads of stuff you talk about every week, so I wouldn't worry too much.
Until he stops saving shots, it's going to be hard to ignore. He has saved his last 20 shots on target, which is a streak that I'm now very invested in. I wonder what is the record, the EFL record, for most consecutive shots on target saved. I'd be surprised if it's much higher than 20. That's a lot of shots on target that you've not let in. He has saved, per the numbers, around 6 or 7 goals above expected. And that's around 2/3 of a goal per game that he is giving to Gary Caldwell's Exeter by dint of his brilliant shot stopping. I think in the interest of not just talking about Whitworth, because Exeter are in such good form, they are 5th in the table, they're unbeaten in 5 and they've won 4 of them to 0. Pierce Sweeney, I think, is having a great season at centre-back. I actually think that Caldwell has really benefited and got a lot from real consistency of selection. 5 players have started all 10 games so far this season, and another 4 have started 8 or 9, and most of those are the defensive unit, which have managed to get into a really good rhythm. And you know, these are good performances that are leading to these 4 wins to 0 in their last 5. They've only conceded first once this season, so the game plan seems absolutely on point from Caldwell. I suppose if you're going to raise some questions about their staying power, you'd point to the fact that they do have the 7th highest XG conceded number. So when you compare that to Stevenage, for example, who we just spoke about, who also have 7 clean sheets, Exeter actually concede about twice as much per match in terms of chances than Stevenage. So I would say Stevenage's overall shape is doing more to restrict opportunity than Exeter's. Having said that, they have been ahead for a lot of games this season. So I think that probably plays a part in that. Their attacking output is about average. And again, they have been defending Leeds a lot, so you can probably bump that up a little bit. He hasn't got a lot of attacking players to get output from, Caldwell. It's basically McGuinness, the target man, and then you've got a group that involves Kamari Doyle, Milenik Ali, Jack Aitchison. Those guys need to keep contributing a lot, and at the moment they are, especially Doyle. And then you look at the schedule, and there's kind of 2 ways of looking at this. There's absolutely no way that Exeter's schedule has been easy so far. They've played Rotherham, they've played Bolton, they've played Blackpool, they've played Peterborough. Those teams have all started the season well below expectation, and they're all outside the top 10 at the moment. So the highest team that Exeter have played in the league table currently is 10th. So you'd say in terms of playing other teams that have started the season in great nick, there are still plenty of tougher fixtures to come for Exeter. In fact, their next 8 games are all against teams between 2nd and 13th. But there's a lot to celebrate with Exeter City at the moment, 5th in the table after 10 games. 3rd in the table now, Wycombe Wanderers. George, 6 wins and 2 draws in their last 8. They beat Posh 3-1.
Rick Cohn. What?
Right.
Richard Kone. Was the architect for this. After 2 teams who've seen a lot of goals in both their games this season had this pegged down as one of the more entertaining games of the weekend, and the first half was a half that happened. Basically, nothing happened. Before in the second half, Posh took the lead through Ricky J. Jones with a close-range finish after some brilliant work from Kwame Poku, who has shown this season his good goal-scoring exploits, but this was where his creative ability came to the fore. Well, on the right-hand side, he played in just one of those balls from deep where it just whips around the whole defensive line and was met by Jones to tap in. But then Richard Kone came on for Fred Onyedinma, and Matt Bloomfield basically feels like one of those managers right now where everything he does comes off, and that substitution after 61 minutes yielded a 9-minute perfect hat-trick from Kone, with the first a deflected effort with his left foot. He then had a shot saved shortly after that before heading in a kind of a weird scooped ball over the top into the far corner before a penalty for a handball that was converted with his right foot. He's someone who He came in from non-league. We didn't know a great deal about him. We know that he performed very well in pre-season for Wycombe, and they were incredibly excited. But as is often the case when players perform well in pre-season, it doesn't often yield the same kind of results in the league. And he lost his place pretty quickly to Daniel Udo. But to come off the bench here and score 3 is huge for him. Frustration, I guess, for Posh, who their games at the moment, like when they go ahead, they seem to be really struggle to stay ahead in games. And to lose a dominant position, having taken the lead away from home, to finish the game with 10 men is not ideal. And I think we're probably seeing, it feels like Peterborough, a classic case of just a really young side who make errors in areas where maybe if you had a bit more experience, it wouldn't necessarily be the case. So Wycombe's incredible start, or incredible run, we should say, because it dates back into last season under Bloomfield, continues. Peterborough still kind of floundering a little bit to find their place in the league.
The 6th hat-trick scored in the EFL this season, Kone's. Tom Cannon bagged 4. Josh Madger, 9th. Dion Charles, now Kone, and Matty Stevens in League 2 have all scored hat-tricks. This very much the only one off the bench, though. In the whole of last season in the EFL, there was only 1 hat-trick off the bench. Milutin Osmajic in a 15-minute sub-appearance for Preston against Huddersfield. So let's see if Kone will be the only substitute hat-trick hero this time
But
out.
there won't be any other perfects.
Surely not.
Yeah,
Surely not.
I thought so.
George Redding 4, Crawley 1.
Yeah, there's always a game, I would say, every weekend where you see the scoreline and you think you know how it's gone, and then you watch it back and it's completely different. And this was that one, because Crawley 4-1, they lose this game 4-1, but pretty much all of Reading's goals, apart from the opener, were against a run of play. Reading were good in the first 20 minutes, especially some good play from Akande on the right-hand side, and when Mbenge put them 1-0 up from a set piece, it was what they deserved, albeit forced a deflected effort to put Crawley back in it. And it was that kind of game. It was very end-to-end. Crawley had loads of opportunities themselves. Swan had a decent effort saved. Quaterno was really lively, as we'd expect. But Lewis Wing did a Lewis ping again, and this was probably the best ping so far we've seen this season, where he hits the ball from 30, 35 yards out, and it's got a lot of swaz on it, and Walcott couldn't get near it, having watched David Button at the other end making a string of really impressive saves. Probably some frustration from Crawley, the way that went. And then Savage scored a really nicely taken goal where Smith and Walcott came out to try and thwart Smith. The ball kind of ricocheted in Savage's path. He didn't have long to think about it, but still managed to execute a really nice first time, I guess kind of a lob from distance, before Smith made the point safe after a nice ball from Elliot to set him up and a decent finish. That's the way the goals went, but there was plenty in there for Rob Elliott and his Crawley side to feel pretty positive about. This was not a game where Crawley struggled to get a foothold within it. It was a game where Button and I think Bindon made one really good clearance off the line as well.
Benge and Bindon both had one.
So I would urge caution before writing off Crawley, especially under a new manager. I think there have been signs. Their games so far have been pretty crazy under Elliott. If you're going to include the EFL Trophy game against Wimbledon as well, that finished 4-3, then the 5-3 against Shrewsbury, now 4-1. So that could be a sign of things to come in terms of just general goal output. But they were 11 against Shrewsbury. They were okay. Here they were okay as well. Just came up against the keeper in inspired form. So they need points relatively soon. They host Lincoln tomorrow night, which should be interesting, and then travel to Northampton, and then travel to Burton. So 3 games there, where I think we'll see what Crawley are all about. But a big win for Reading. I guess Reading fans hoping that after some initial rumours about Ruben Sellers in Cardiff, that seems to have gone very quiet, and a decent win there. Just as we say every week, hopefully some good news around the ownership situation soon too.
Barnsley got a big away win at Blackpool. Now, Blackpool manager Steve Bruce was absent from this one. Very sad news last week that his granddaughter, also the daughter of Matt Smith, the former Salford striker, among many other teams, very sadly died at just 4 months old. So Steve Bruce absent from this one, and similarly to our discussions about Liam Manning's bereavement and obviously the death of George Baldock, it contributes to what's been a desperately sad few weeks across English football. And quite affecting, I think, for a lot of people. So please do make sure that you are talking if you're finding any of this difficult. And of course, and I know that all of you as well, just sending all of the love to Steve Bruce and Matt Smith's families, and to Liam Manning's family, and also to the family of George Baldock. Barnsley left Bloomfield Road with all 3 points right at the end. Mark Roberts scoring. Very strange. I couldn't quite understand how that header went in, but it just dropped in somehow for all three for Barnsley. Blackpool had equalised through another quite gritty set piece of their own, Casey, after Davis Keylor-Dunn had put Barnsley ahead with a classic Davis Keylor-Dunn goal. I'm not quite sure if Blackpool defender Odell Ofire had ever seen Davis Keylor-Dunn play, but when he is running towards goal off the left-hand side, you do not allow him to cut inside and shoot with his right foot. And the thing that I'm interested here with Barnsley is, why are they so consistently good away from home and not doing enough at home to turn that into a promotion? So they've got the second best away record so far this season. Last season it was the third best in League One. Season before that it was the fourth best in League One. To me, that level of competence away from home should be the foundation for an automatic promotion team. But for whatever reason, they have been below par, to those standards at home for quite some time. And I just don't really understand why that would be. Yeah, it is.
Why?
That's why I'm not trying to give any answers. I'm asking the question.
But why is one team, and that is through different cycles of managers and players, still so consistently good away from home? I just find it baffling.
I do not know.
Episode 5 of George doesn't understand home and away trends.
No, you're more of a Neighbours fan. George, Huddersfield 3, Bristol Rovers 1.
Yeah, really, this is Huddersfield back to form, because, it wasn't very long ago that I think Huddersfield looked like the clear possible threat to Birmingham. They looked like, when we started the season, they looked like the team who could threaten them. But it hasn't really come to pass that way, and we saw them go through a difficult run of form. We saw them go to Birmingham and, despite only losing the game 1-0, be outclassed on the day. But back-to-back wins against Barnsley and Bristol Rovers may have righted that wrong, and they were really dominant here. Pearson scoring a set-piece goal, as you can kind of rely on him doing a couple of times a season, before Marshall scored with a really nicely taken finish. And then Radulovic, who has struggled a little bit for form and fitness for Huddersfield so far this season. It feels like him scoring the kind of goal that he did to make it 3-0, just a nice tap in.
It's time, mate. It's coming. Big Bojan, it's coming. Mark my words, this guy scores goals.
Well, there you go. Ali has told you Huddersfield fans to maintain the faith. I think that Marshall is the one to look out for. We have
Well, I think we can talk about them together, because Marshall's movement for Radulovic's goal was the perfect two up top movement. Marshall peeling back to the penalty spot, Radulovic crashing the 6-yard box. Who do you go with as a centre back? Well, they left Radulovic all alone.
Correct.
Good patterns of play.
Very good. Bristol Rovers hadn't had a shot in the game when Radulovic made it 3-0, which is a concern.
Wow.
Hutchinson scored after 70-odd minutes. They struggled to really threaten after that. Big concerns for Bristol Rovers, who still have it in them to put in a performance like this, where they are just basically non-existent as a footballing team, which is a bit of a concern for them, albeit away at Huddersfield, when Huddersfield are in this kind of form, is a relatively difficult place to go. It feels, League One is interesting this season, because Burton, Cambridge, Crawley and Shrewsbury feel all pretty bad, even if I'm not completely sold on Cambridge being that bad. So for teams like Bristol Rovers, Northampton and Leeds United, who started the season pretty concerningly, they'll be hoping that they're all much worse than them. But I do think performances like this mean that even though Bristol Rovers have more points than those beneath them, it was a pretty concerning effort. Having said that, they came off the back of 2 consecutive wins against Charlton and Burton, so still some reason for optimism, but this was a reversion back to what we saw prior to those wins.
Bolton beat Burton 2-1. It means because of Portsmouth's win, because of Cambridge's win, Burton are now the only team in the EFL yet to win a league game this season. They've lost 5 in a row, and I think this was another episode of Burton's kind of season in a nutshell, the story of their season, where Are they a horrendous football team that is constantly being dominated by their opposition? No, I really don't believe that they are. I believe that in almost every game this season, Burton have had good spells where they've played good stuff, where they've gained confidence, played some nice football and had some opportunities. But it's only spells, and they're consistently having more spells in games where they're not strong enough, either mentally or on a technical, like defensive level in terms of team shape. And you know, in this game, Bolton started pretty strongly, as you'd imagine, at home. But Burton managed to get through the initial blitz. From, I reckon, half an hour gone to about an hour gone, Burton got a bit of a foothold in the game. They had a flurry of attempts themselves. I think they were playing okay, showing some decent bits. And then, just after an hour's gone, Bolton have tried and build an attack down the right-hand side. The ball goes out for a throw. And as Randell Williams picks up the ball to throw, Aaron Collins sprints in behind. You can't be offside off a throw-in. And Randell Williams has an absolute catapult. So he just launches it over the whole defensive line. Collins is through and scores 1-1. It was really inventive, smart play from both of those two players. But it's horrible from a Burton defensive point of view. You can't be getting an hour in at the tough sheet and then conceding where the assist is a throw from the opposition's half, basically a through ball throw-in. It's just not... The standards aren't good enough, and it's completely undermining them. They then concede another immediately, rattled by going behind. And then, you know, they get a goal back and they lose, having scored, and that's just the way of it at the moment. Only Shrewsbury have a worse goal difference in the second half, which I think kind of fuels my theory that they're doing okay stuff. They're not terribly set up. They just don't seem to be suited to this level of football at the moment. They can't get through full games without shooting themselves in the foot, and it means they're the only team in the EFL still without a win. There was quite a big game between Orient and Northampton in the sense that these are the two teams directly above the relegation zone at the moment, trying to prove that they are, you know, don't have as many issues as Shrewsbury, Crawley, Cambridge and Burton. And Cobblers won it 1-0. Both teams had only one shot on target in this game. Orient did have some big openings, but really profligate in front of goal. Dan Ajay going around the keeper and hitting the side netting springs to mind. Whereas in Cam McGeehan, Northampton have got someone who consistently throws himself at stuff inside the box and picks up goals as a result of it with brave attacking play. He scored following a long throw. And Orient kind of lost their confidence a bit in the second half. Richie Wellens was fuming about the second half performance after being, in his eyes anyway, the better side in the first half. And criticising the strikers for just not doing enough to turn the team's good play into clear-cut chances. Angry with the team's character in the second half and basically just not carrying out his instructions. So Orient are sitting there at the moment in 20th with 8 points from 11 games, having large spells in games against basically any opposition where they look pretty good, but just very blunt at the top of the pitch. And it seems to be knocking their confidence quite a bit. And Charlton 1, Stockport 1 was a competitive game at the Valley. Most importantly for me, the return of Miles Leaburn from injury, one of my favourite young players in the EFL, and by all accounts looking pretty sharp on his return. We also saw Terry Taylor making his third league start for Charlton after joining last summer. So two former 21 under 21 picks now back and fit and playing for Charlton. Some interesting League One games in midweek, which we'll be covering on Under the Lights on NTT20.com. Wrexham v Huddersfield stands out. Bristol Rovers v Shrewsbury, I think, feels quite big for both of those managers this week. And in League Two over the weekend, the league leaders Port Vale kept on rolling. A 3-1 win against Fleetwood Town means it's 6 wins and 2 draws in their last 8. Darren Moore's got a real Darren Moore thing going on here. Consistent level of performance, very high floor to the team at the moment. A really good group of experienced players who are playing very well. But also, he loves to get loanees normally, Darren Moore, doesn't he, with just a little bit of stardust. And then sometimes they need a little bit of stardust and they just sprinkle on a little bit of stardust. And I think that's kind of what happened here, where they went ahead through a lovely goal. The right wing-back cover found Stockley, who found Richards to put them ahead. But Fleetwood equalised, Johnston at the back post. And then Fleetwood at 1-1 had massive chances. Ronan Coughlin in particular at 1-1, not taking a big chance to put Fleetwood ahead. So at 1-1, it felt like Fleetwood probably in the ascendancy. Darren Moore turns to his bench. What does he see? Triple B. Benicio Baker Boaty, 20-year-old on loan from Brighton and Hove Albion. He comes on and almost immediately sets up Croasdale for a really nice goal with a great assist. Probably question marks over the keeper Harrington, who has been very good for Fleetwood this season, but I think probably would have liked to do better with Croasdale's shot. And then Ronan Curtis heads in for 3-1. So not loads in the game, I don't think. Boiled down basically to Port Vale taking their chances at a crucial time and Fleetwood wasting theirs. Vale now on 2 points per game with 24 from their 12 league games and top of the table. Not far behind them, George Donny, who picked up a late 3 points at Swindon.
Yeah, late 3 points thanks to a penalty dispatched by Ironside at the 94th minute. Massive frustration from Swindon that having pegged them back, having gone behind early. They weren't able to get a point. I feel for Swindon at the moment, they're still really struggling to implement or just kind of impose themselves on games. Here, they had quite a lot of the ball, but really struggling to advance into decent areas. When they did, Smith was on hand to tuck it home, having come off the bench, levelling after Oluwu put Donny in front with a header at the back post from a corner. It wasn't vintage by any stretch from Donny, who continued to go pretty well. But yeah, for Swindon right now, I mean, it feels like they're better than the worst teams in the league. You know, we saw them go to Cheltenham last Saturday and win 3-2. This was their first defeat in a couple, having drawn the games against Tranmere and Harrogate, albeit those are the games you'd probably expect them to want to pick up more from. But they're still down in 21st on, 11 points at the moment. So for them to come back against a team in Donny who are up towards the top end of the table, but not to convert it into anything is going to be a big source of frustration, especially when they've got quality within the side in Wright and Kilkenny. So frustration from them, but for Donny, another important 3 points. And it does really feel to me like the class teams in League Two are starting to make themselves very much known. And Donny's certainly one of those.
In third place, Walsall.
One of those.
4-1 winners at Grimsby. This is a very, very, very well-oiled machine, isn't it? And it was good to be reminded of that because the 2-2 draw at Chesterfield was an excellent result, to be quite honest, on paper. The 6-2 defeat, that completely random one at home to Fleetwood in the last set of midweeks, is now very much, proven to be the exception to the rule because they're just very good. They worked their way into this game and then they blitzed Grimsby in the second half. I mean, who's my favourite right wing back in the EFL? Is it Ryan Barnett or is it Connor Barrett of Walsall?
Yours is Ryan Barnett, mine is Connor Barrett.
It's like trying to choose between your favourite children, I imagine. Barrett with a massive hand in 3 goals here. First, bit of skill to find room for a cross straight onto the head of big Jamil Matt for 1-0. He then back flicked a corner at the near post, which looped and was tapped in by Nathan Lowe at the back post. He also unlocked the defence with a ball to Hall, who squared it for DJ for their 4th goal. The only one that Connor Barrett wasn't involved in was it my favourite goal of the weekend? Because Lewis Wings was amazing. But Dennis Jealous. I mean, Dennis Yeboah.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Dennis isn't part of his name at all. So it needs to be Tony Jealous or Jamie Yeboah.
No, it's Jamie Yeboah.
Jamie Yeboah.
Yeah.
With a goal that you have to see to truly appreciate it, but a really, really wild square ball from the fullback, Grimsby fullback, flies into the air and lands on the chest of Jamie Jealous. And he chests it with the tenderness of the softest, fluffiest, featheriest pillow you could possibly imagine. And he just pops it up for himself. And before he hits it where you want the ball to go, like in a dream world. And it's even better. It's so good. And Jealous is now making a bit of a habit of scoring goals that are just a bit too good. And Walsall themselves a bit too good on the day for Grimsby. And tell me about Notts County beating Wimbledon 1-0.
I think this game went by script, where Notts County dominated possession. AFC Wimbledon were very happy to let them dominate possession. AFC Wimbledon had no issue whatsoever creating opportunities in transition and from set pieces. Weren't able to convert any of them. And Notts County won the game because of a really weird goal where it's from a set piece and Matty Platt diverts it towards goal, and I can't really work out the course it takes from his foot into the back of the net because it feels like it's one of those that a keeper should save pretty comfortably. So you have to assume that it's taken a diversion or something's happened in order to prevent him from making the save. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there was a great deal between the two sides. Two very good League Two sides in my mind. One moment from a set piece, basically. I think Notts County will feel happy that they've kept a clean sheet at home against a side that have had no issue from scoring goals so far this season. And I'm sure Johnny Jackson will be aggrieved that his, regardless of the way the goal went in, that they've conceded from a set piece.
And what of Bradford 2, Gillingham 1? Bradford now unbeaten across their last 9 home league games, winning 7 and drawing 2. That is significant, given their how difficult they have found it to put together strong runs at home over the last few years.
Yeah, I think we can put a pin in that now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Gone. Fortress, if anything.
Fortress.
Not a difficult place
Fortress
to play.
VP. Jaden Clark, who we've spoken about a lot this season, put Gills ahead with a really nice finish to make it 1-0, but it was a bit of an onslaught, especially in the kind of towards the back end of the first half. After that, with Neil Byrne scoring from a set piece, and then one of the goals of the day from Jack Shepherd, who it was a kind of horrible goalmouth scramble, which eventually resulted in the ball being cleared towards Shepherd, with a member of the crowd shouting, "Someone hit it," I think was the quote. And Jack Shepherd thought, yeah, right. And as he was backpedaling, he hit a first-time left-footed volley into the top left-hand corner. A really nicely taken goal that sent me down a nice Jack Shepherd rabbit hole.
Lovely.
Is there like a pun there about shepherds and holes? Not really. And what I loved was that when he was signed, so he's on loan from Barnsley. He's a left-footed, 6'2", ball-playing defender who can either play left side of a 3, probably left side of a 2, or he can play left back. And I think he looks like he's pretty good. Anyway, they signed him from Pontefract Collieries, right? Yeah. And in the official press release from Pontefract, when they sold him to Barnsley, it said by the end of the season he has settled at centre half and was even donned a young Maldini by the home faithful.
Lovely.
Which I love to know how that manifests itself. Do they have a song where they just called him young Maldini? Was it just something that like the lads said down on the terraces? Either way, the idea of a Pontefract left-footed centre-back being a young Maldini is lovely, and he's not doing his reputation no harm whatsoever with finishes like that.
Newport 0, Chesterfield 3 on Friday night. Newport just shooting themselves in the foot, really, and then the other foot just to make sure. Going 1-0 down in the first minute, where pretty routine ball over the top of the defence. Poor communication from Jameson and Townsend. I'm probably pointing more fingers at Jameson for the way that he impeded his goalkeeper, Dylan Markanday, mopping up to make it 1-0. And then after Chesterfield had some okay spells during the game in the second half, Will Grigg came on and scored 2 very Will Grigg goals in the second half, both of them assisted by Ollie Banks. I see that Paul Cook and his staff have signed a new contract today at Chesterfield. I think it's very well deserved. They are a team who are on 18 points from 12 games, just outside the playoff places. One of those slightly strange teams that you get at this stage of the season, who have drawn 6 out of 12 games, the most draws in League Two. And what do we always say about teams that are drawing a disproportionate amount of games? What do we always ask ourselves?
Are they when they stop drawing, are they going to start losing loads or start winning loads?
Winning loads.
Okay.
Chesterfield, good IMO. Aki 1, Barrow 0, 3 wins in a row for Accrington Stanley, 4 defeats in 5 for Barrow. Early season form very much turned on its head for these two teams. And I think for Aki, it's obviously it suits us to say this, and maybe it's a bit of outcome bias on my part, but probably a decent case in trusting what the data is telling you after 8 games. Gillingham also being another decent example of that, where Accrington had a poor start to the season, didn't win in their first 8, kept going ahead in games, posting good numbers but throwing it away, sort of quite weak mentality by the looks of things. And that doesn't always last forever. They got their first win, gained confidence from it. Turns out what was underneath all of that at their core is an all right team. And 3 wins in a row has seen them move up the table. Sean Whalley with the winning goal. Just love Sean Whalley, 37-year-old that still runs more than anyone else on the pitch. Twists inside out, gets shots off, right foot, left foot, found the corner with his left peg and won them the game. And I think Barrow at the moment just cannot work out how to score. They've drawn a blank in 4 of their last 5 games. And I feel a bit sorry for Stephen Clements, where Barry were excellent, weren't they, to start the season? I haven't misremembered that.
No, they were.
Incredible, particularly out of possession. All around the same week or so, their goalkeeper, Paul Farman, one of the best in the league, got injured. Their centre-back, Canavan, got injured. Both been missing since then. And they went to Chelsea away in the Cup on a Tuesday night when they were on a bit of a roll in the league. Following the Chelsea game, they had a away game on the Saturday at Gillingham and a away game the next time out against Doncaster in the midweek. And I just think those things all together, the 2 injuries, the ridiculous away schedule, the difficulty of their opposition, has just smashed them for 6, basically. So I don't necessarily know what the answer is. Clements needs to piece it together, basically, in a different way now without those players available. Morecambe lost 3-1 to MK Dons. Scott Hogan plays for MK Dons. Scott Hogan scores for MK Dons.
I think this is a really, really good signing.
Yeah?
Like, very quietly a good signing, yeah. He strikes
Scott
me...
Hogan's a very good signing.
Yeah, well done. He's only 32 years old. And it was interesting.
Very young, 32 years old, by the way. Very young.
Incredibly young.
One of the youngest ages that there is, I've always thought.
Isn't it funny? I reckon if you met Scott Hogan, you would feel about 10 years younger than him. And you're the same age.
Disagree.
Okay.
Disagree.
Have you met him before?
No, but I think I just think we'd feel exactly the same age. Or actually, thinking about it, I think I'd feel like he was 2 months and 1 day older than me.
Nice.
Approximately.
I would... interesting to note, when he signed on the 5th of October, Scott Lindsay, in the press release, said, I'm just talking about a lot of press releases today. So I just read a lot of releases. He made a point of being like, yeah, he might be 32, but he plays like he's 22. Which is funny because I think he's one of those players that would be written off by a lot of people as being like past it and over the hill. And it's forgotten that he is someone who I think was probably at the wrong club for the majority of the last 5 years or so. A club that didn't play to his strengths at all, who barely created any chances. But Scott Hogan, as a young striker, was prolific and was someone who was a proper like penalty box finisher, fox in the box striker. And I think he's now at a club that will suit that down like absolutely perfectly, playing for a side who get the ball down and play, who are kind of geared around creating chances for a striker. Look how Max Dean got on last season when he came into the side. I think this could be one of the smartest signings we've seen in the EFL this season, where, you know, if he is fit and his mobility is good, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be, and looking at the goal that he scored on Saturday, missing a 1-on-1 and scoring the rebound, he then had a really good opportunity and down the right hand side saved as well. I think he could score loads of goals, and I think the perception around him being like over the hill and older and whatever is basically born out of playing, you know, basically doing Jukovic's running for 5 years. Whereas at a much lower level, and we often see strikers, you know, I speak about a lot, like Matty Taylor's a good example. Someone at League One and League Two level is a proper goal scoring striker, but then he lost that edge in the Championship, so became something else and became a bit of a runner. Then he dropped back down again, started scoring again. I think Hogan is exactly that, and I think we'll see a very different output from him this season.
Can you guess what absolutely freaked my nut in the highlight for Scott Hogan's goal?
No.
Him completing a dribble in the build-up to it.
Yeah.
But not just completing a dribble, like picking it up, having dropped quite deep. And like the only thing he wanted to do was run at the centre-back. I think he might have megged the centre-back or at least knocked it past him.
Yeah.
Then he was through, shot saved, tapped in the rebound. But like, I was like, who's that scoring for MK Dons? I don't recognise that player. And then I saw it was Scott Hogan. And I was like, I don't think so. I mean, is there something? Because and I'm not being horrible here. I've made sure that I'm not missing something, and that actually Scott Hogan's always been a big dribbler. His successful dribbles per 90 over the last 5 seasons has never got above 0.5. So at most once every 2 games he would complete a dribble.
That was it.
But I've never even thought of him trying to dribble. He's always been like the most simple in possession player, up front imaginable. You know, if it comes to him outside the box, move it on as quickly as possible and wait to get on it inside the box and finish chances. So maybe he's been working on it in the time he was out of contract. Maybe he's playing at a level now where he's realised he's actually really, really, really good. So he's got the confidence to do that, which he wouldn't have had against Championship defenders. I do know that this is his first time at this level since 2013-14 when he played for Rochdale. He didn't win the Golden Boot. Sam Winnell scored 23. He scored 17. But he did have the highest goals per 90. That was 11 years ago in League Two. I wouldn't be that surprised if he finishes this season with the highest goals per 90 number in League Two. Tranmere beat Bromley. Big win for them. Bromley making most of the running in this game, I think it's fair to say, but not putting themselves ahead. And tough scene for big Omar Shomi at the back, who really mishandled a long punt forward and allowed medium-sized Omari Patrick to run in to score and put Tranmere 1-0 up. Not long after that, Saunders came off the bench for them, and immediately a throw-in found itself to a Bromley defender who attempted a back pass, completely underhit it. Saunders ran clear and scored for 2-0. So Bromley getting one back, but Tranmere getting quite a valuable win and scoring 2 goals, which is, although I would suggest they were more down to opposition errors than their own quality creative play. Hopefully it gives them a bit more confidence, because that is 7 goals in 11 games so far. What gives me confidence with Tranmere is the fact that Sam Finley is now finally available and fit to start games. I thought he looked like one of the better signings in League Two this summer and a good fit for Tranmere. And hopefully he can prove that now that he's fit and playing. And Brad Walker back fit recently as well. I think those 2 starting games for Tranmere does make me feel that they look a little bit stronger than they did a couple of weeks ago. And Cole U lost at home to Cheltenham. The highlights of this game, every single highlight was a shot by either Jordan Thomas of Cheltenham or Lyle Taylor of Colchester, and Jordan Thomas 1-2-1.
Jordan Thomas 1-2-1. Yeah, again, on a weekend where there have been a few goals, but I don't understand what happened. His second goal was either a really good finish, which kind of wrong-footed the whole pitch, or there was massive deflection. I couldn't really work it out on second viewing. Cheltenham, I think they rode their luck, it's fair to say, in this game. Colchester were the dominant force basically throughout. It feels like we're talking about 2 of our selections on the betting show here, where I put up Bromley, you put up Colchester, and it kind of feels like the games were relatively similar, with the home side probably deserving to win, but the away side just taking their chances.
Both feeling a bit sad about it?
Yeah. I think you did well to swap these 2 around on the running order and not let us just moan.
Yeah. Well, you found a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, don't pin me up against the wall now, mate.
Lyle Taylor had a lot of shots in this game, 7 shots within the game, scoring one of them. On another day, he probably scores quite a few, but it was Thomas who was more clinical with his attempts. Colchester are kind of that side at the moment where it feels like they just can't really get going. The performances are fine, but they're struggling to win games. They haven't won a league game since beating Tranmere 3-0 at the end of September. That is their only league win this season. So, this is one of those occasions where I personally look at their performances, look at their underlying numbers, look at their game by game, and we find it impossible to blame Danny Cowley for what's going on, because, again, between both boxes, it kind of feels like they're playing okay, yet the results are quite clearly not good enough.
And big Samson Tavide picking up an injury in the first half doesn't bode well. He's been playing really, really well recently. Just on Jordan Thomas quickly, I mean, I've been waiting to see this from him since he joined Cheltenham in January from Bath City. That's because Craig Bradley, who's part of the NTT20 ecosystem, both as a legend of NTT20 squad, but also as someone who contributes to NTT20.com's transfer coverage. Craig knows the Southwest region incredibly well, on every level, basically, from professional down to non-league and even the youth systems as well. Is an excellent scout, and he has been and is convinced that Jordan Thomas is and can be like a quality player both at this level and above, based on what he's seen from him. And he's just been held back for whatever reason since he joined Cheltenham. This was his first start of the season. I think he only started 2 last season after joining as well. So it might be that the system hasn't really suited him, more of a winger than a wing back. Let's hope that we see more of him from this point. 2 draws in League Two. Carlisle-Harrogate was 1-1. Harrogate goalkeeper James Belshaw winning man of the match, as he often seems to. That's because Carlisle had 22 shots to their 4, 9 shots on target to their 2, but only 1 goal each. Carlisle's from Luke Armstrong, who did not do a muted celebration in front of the Harrogate fans. Quite the opposite, in fact. And Crewe and Salford drew 1-1. Woodburn's goal cancelled out by a really nice wing-back to wing-back goal from Crewe. Zach Williams to Ryan Cooney, and a 1-1 draw. Crewe injury issues again, which I feel like I say every other month when it comes to Crewe, Alex. They're very light in midfield, they're very light up front, but getting a point at home to Salford. Thanks for listening to the pod. Join us on Under the Lights, a midweek recap podcast. That'll be going out for NTT20.com paid subscribers on Wednesday, and then Thursday a betting show, and Saturday a weekend, and we just keep going and we keep having a great time. And
Is it the end of the season yet?
And thank you very much for listening. Go well.